having said that, when Daniel and I first ran across the Predictive Index in 2006, we were clients, and as soon as someone gave us our first readback, we're like, oh my God, that was like scary. I need that tool. If I could do that for every one of my employees, imagine how much more effective I would be.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Leading with Audacious Confidence. I am your host, Alicia Couri, and with me today is an incredible guest, Mike Zani. And let me tell you a little bit about Mike before we bring him on. After graduating from Brown University, Mike Zani coached the 1996 U.S. Olympic sailing team, where he was named Coach of the Year for the sport of sailing. He later attended Harvard Business School, after which he and a former classmate partnered to form a search fund, which searches to acquire companies where there's the potential to apply better management practices to dramatically improve business results. The first company they acquired was LEDCO, a computer docking station manufacturer. As CEO, Mike increased LEDCO's revenue by 350% in just 4 years. Wow. After selling LEDCO, Mike acquired and ran ShapeUp, a SaaS wellness platform, and grew revenues by 600% in 3 years. You think he learned something? I think so. At both companies, Mike and his team used the Predictive Index, a workforce assessment methodology, to ensure they were doing the best job hiring and managing people. In 2014, Mike led an investment to purchase the Predictive Index and became the CEO. So welcome to the show, Mike Zani, CEO of Predictive Index.
It's great to be here. I love your energy. Can't wait to try and match it if I can see if I can keep up.
Well, first of all, I love to ask my guests, the very first question is, what is your leadership philosophy?
Well, I think this is something that Daniel, my business partner, and I have been crafting, but we love to win with and through teams. You know, if you try and do it all yourself, you're limited by whatever you can do, and you might as well be, you know, an independent consultant. And there's not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like, if you want to build something big and audacious, it's like you got to win with and through teams, because you have to leverage yourself. And nothing is cooler than having every one of your direct reports and all of their direct reports be better than you are at their job.
That is so true.
And so when that happens, you just feel you get to stand back and watch it happen.
Yeah, that's great. This is a very different response that I've gotten from you than anyone else. So that's awesome. Now, you have actually had leadership roles, very important leadership roles early on while you were in college. Tell us about coaching the 1996 Olympic team. How did that come about?
I really feel quite fortunate for that to have come about. I was lost, like a lot of recent graduates. I was a geochemistry major, and I was trying to make geochemistry and my major work for me. So I started as an environmental consultant, and that was not my calling. I loved the people I worked with, but that was not my calling. And I went back to the Brown geology lab where I worked as an undergrad, worked for a professor, and I was applying to get a PhD in meteorology. I was pretty good at the maths, and I said, okay, you know, meteorology would be great. And I always was fascinated, as a sailor, was fascinated with the weather. I was making $9 an hour in the lab. It's not a lot of money. It's hard to put food on your table and make ends meet.
$9 an hour.
It's tough. So I coached sailing and started doing sailing clinics to augment my compensation, because I could make about $300 a day coaching.
Wow.
Well, the next thing I know, I had a sailing school, and I had 12 coaches working for me, and I had this little entrepreneurial gig going, and I was working with talented people, and amazingly, some of my athletes became Olympic caliber athletes, and two boats or four athletes qualified for the Olympics. And
Wow.
the U.S. Olympic team asked me to join the team because my athletes made it to the Olympics. They're like, well, we
Yeah.
need you.
Right.
So it was
That's
kind of
amazing.
stumbled upon that.
Well, I think it's more than just stumbling upon it. I think you had a calling and a gift for it, and your gift makes room for you, and that's what happened. Made room for you.
Well, I couldn't say at 26 that I had really tapped in to that gift, but I was working with amazing people, and my philosophy of work with and through
Yeah.
teams. I was working with wonderful athletes, amazing talents.
Mm-hmm.
They trusted me, even though I was only 26, to sort of coach and lead and guide them through something. And
Right.
then obviously the powers that be on the U.S. Olympic team saw something as well. It was a very romantic job, but I was on the road 330 days that year, which
Wow.
is you'll
Yeah. That's
yeah,
crazy. But
it
as a
was
young
crazy.
person, that's the time to do it. It's
It
definitely the
it
time
was
to do it.
it was romantic and it was cool, but it was also something I will never, settle down and have a family, which is something I wanted to do if I
Yeah.
keep that job.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I wanted to find out during your career as a leader and as you were growing and building, is there anything that stands out as like a big challenge or your biggest mistake that you've done as a leader in that role and figured out like, how am I going to recover from that? Has that ever happened to you?
Well, certainly, I've gone on this journey to find, what's all this junk that is on my back of T-shirt,
Hmm.
which is the stuff I need to work on.
Right.
We use this framework at PI called front of T-shirt, back of T-shirt. So the front of T-shirt stuff is all this amazing stuff
Yeah.
that you yourself were given jobs based on the front of your T-shirt. But the back of T-shirt stuff
Hmm.
is the stuff that is just as powerful, often related to the front of T-shirt, but that holds you back. And I did go on a journey in 2006, 2007 to find out what was on the back of my T-shirt because I wanted to know. And honestly, I do think, you know, running people over and not listening, that
Hmm.
those things that I can do, I don't do it every day, that you know, not being in control of that stuff.
Mm, yeah,
And
I love how you phrase that too, the back of the t-shirt stuff, because you can't exactly swivel your head 180 degrees to see what's going on back there.
you can try, but you really need to ask, someone you trust.
Hmm.
You need to be vulnerable to get there. Um, but it was interesting. I think I've been going on this journey to what's on the back of my T-shirt, but in identifying early on. So when I was a young CEO, a year and a half into running LEDCO with Daniel, I mean, he's effectively the co-CEO. I
Hmm.
carry the title because I meet more people. He's the inside CEO. I'm the outside CEO,
Yeah.
if you will. Um, and I don't think I was a good manager. I was trying to be a good manager,
Hmm.
but if you don't always listen to people, or if you're too enamored with your own ideas,
Oh.
that you're not going to let great ideas bubble up from where they probably with the people who are closest to the great ideas
Hmm.
and can really unlock so much potential. I think I was being short-sighted, trying to do too much of it myself.
Yeah. And you're a maverick, right? Is that right?
I'm a persuader, but
Persuader. Okay.
so not far from a maverick, but a little bit of formality that keeps me in check.
Yeah, check. All right. And these, we're throwing out terminology that I know you're not going to understand, but Predictive Index has 17 different reference profiles. So maybe a little later we'll have Daniel, not Daniel, sorry. We'll have Mike talk about the 17. You talked about Daniel and got me all
That's right.
confused now. So we'll have Mike talk about the 17 reference profiles in Predictive Index. So you can, it's really fascinating how simple this assessment is, but so powerful in the results that you get and how you can really understand yourself and the front of the t-shirt stuff and the back of the t-shirt stuff. So how did you, I'm going to circle back to the reference profiles, but how did you unpack some of that stuff, and did it have any effect on your confidence as you were moving through understanding the back of the t-shirt stuff?
Well, certainly when I first learned of this front of t-shirt, back of t-shirt framework, and it's a Bain partner named Jim Allen who came up with this framework. My wife introduced it to me because she does a lot of consulting work. She used to be a Bainey and does a lot of consulting work for Bain. So she comes home with this idea. I was like, oh my God, I got to do that. So I actually hired a coach to help me identify the back of t-shirt stuff. And that coach used a battery of assessments, Myers-Briggs, the Predictive Index, FIRO-B, numerous others. I can't even remember all of their names, but starting to try and triangulate on what this stuff is. Having said that, when Daniel and I first ran across the Predictive Index in 2006, we were clients, and as soon as someone gave us our first readback, we're like, oh my God, that was like scary. I need that tool. If I could do that for every one of my employees, imagine how much more effective I would be.
Yeah.
So I do think there are some people who just switch on and go, oh, these things could be, this data can be really profound and have profound implications if you run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I took it and I was flawed because I've taken assessments myself, just in my own self-development, my own self-awareness, a lot of different assessments. And there are two that stand out for me, Colby and Predictive Index. Those were like life-changing for me. So I really appreciate it. And your journey to getting Predictive Index was because you were a client. Right?
That's right. It is amazing when you're a client of a product, you like it so much, you investigate and say, wow, we should buy this company. It doesn't happen that often. It is funny. The old Victor Kayyem commercial where he's like, I like the company's, the razor. I like the razor so much we bought the company.
We bought the company, right. So how did that come about? How did acquiring Predictive Index come about for you?
Well, Daniel and I, we're sort of snot-nosed managers. We bought our first company using a search fund model. So it's not our own money. We weren't born with the silver spoon. We were fortunate to go to a business school that gave us a network enough when we bought a company and then passed the hat to a bunch of high net worth individuals. And we didn't put any money in ourselves. We didn't have any money. All we had was debt. But we sold our first company and and had a good return on investment. And our investors said, hey, do that again. We'll give you more money. I said, okay, that's good.
Win.
That's good. It's kind of like flipping houses. If the first one goes well, you have money to go do the second one.
Yeah.
So we decided to do it again. And we thought about what would be the best company to start with. And Predictive Index was top of the list. So in 2009, we tried to buy PI and we pitched the board and got close, but they said no. And we were crushed. So we went on and invested and ran other companies. But in 2014, the opportunity came back to us. And
I love when that happens.
Yeah, it's if you're a sports fan, we hung around the basket for a rebound. We did, though, keep in touch with them every year, and we had good relations, and we were patient, and we always expressed that we really loved the product and cared about it. And if they ever wanted to consider selling, we would love to do it. Yeah.
And you continued using the product. I think that said a lot too, for all the companies that you purchased or invested in, to use it as that model to increase the company revenue.
We did. We used it, and we sold it to, and not for remuneration. I would just go to my friends who are running companies and be like, you'd be an idiot not to use this. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, what? So I can't use that same sales tactic today. But back then, I used to really tell my friends, I'm like, listen, you need this.
Mm-hmm.
Take the assessment. I'll give you a read back. You should do this with your senior team. It changed how I talk to, manage, think about people. You should consider it. So
Yeah.
Daniel and I both think we sold 9 or 10 clients, just to our,
Just by telling them to do it.
just telling people to do it.
Yeah. That is incredible. And now you are running Predictive Index, and there have been a lot of changes that you were able to implement to even make this software even better than when you were using it.
Well, it was a very low bar at the
Mm-hmm.
time. I mean, the company started in pencil and paper,
Mm-hmm.
migrated to online surveying, but that's about all they had online. They had an online surveying
Yeah.
tool and really a repository for assessments that you could search and file people in
Mm-hmm.
departments. That was it. There was no analytics. There was no
Yeah.
data. There was no data play. Like all of this psychometric data that we're sitting on to give suggestions, what would be good profiles for this particular role? What are
Mm-hmm.
these two people going to be like when they work together? What are
Mm-hmm.
the joys and frustrations? So we realized there was so much power if we built a proper SaaS platform that had
Mm-hmm.
data analytics that we
And
could, yeah.
no, I was just going to say, and we use a lot of sports references in PI because sports uses a lot of data and analytics to pick the best teams and to find great players and to find that top talent for your team. So you're right. People would be, unwise not to use. Trying to frame it really nicely.
You're a better
Unwise not
person than
to
I.
use what they have on right in front of them. Get the analytics, get the data so that you can really effectively manage and create opportunities for yourself and your company and those that you're working for. So yeah, go ahead. You're going to say
Well,
something.
I sometimes regret how often we use sports analogies because they don't land with everyone. But
No.
sports had great data, and because sports statisticians seem to measure almost everything,
Mm-hmm.
but then they determine things that are very predictive. I've heard from a, a scout in football
Mm-hmm.
that they said the number one, and I don't know if this is still true, but this is what they told me. The number one predictor of explosiveness is the standing high jump. How high someone can jump.
Really?
And if you take like a 350-pound offensive lineman, it's not going to be as high as the wide receiver.
Right.
But
The
if you look at
200-pound
that's
wide receiver.
that's right. But if you look at all the 320-pound plus people, and you see this one outlier that they have massive leaping
Vertical.
ability,
Right.
that you're like, that is the number one predictor of explosiveness, and you're like, maybe I should look at that.
Mm. Yeah.
And we're just on this early journey with talent, strategic talent management, and talent optimization to say, what are the things that are predicting that for people to be successful in their
Mm-hmm.
different roles at work? And it's really exciting to be on that journey.
I love it. I love it. And the 17, we mentioned the 17 reference profiles earlier. Um, it's so interesting how this really short assessment, I mean, it takes you 5-6 minutes to do it, but how it pulls so much data to give you these reference points. So what are the 17 different profiles? I know they're in different categories. What are they?
Well, I can certainly, if you'd like, we could put a link in, and people can go get to the reference profiles and see them and their definitions.
Absolutely. We'll definitely do that in the show notes. We'll put.
That's right. And honestly, they can take the assessment too and map it up against that. So no doubt that we can we can do that. But the interesting part about the assessment is we ask only 2 questions.
Mhm.
And of those questions, it's stimulus response. There are 86 adjectives. You choose ones that, stimulate you, and you don't choose others. It's called a stimulus response tool.
Mhm.
And people say, well, I only checked 25 words. How can you get that much from 25 words? And they're not taking credit for all the things they didn't check.
Didn't check,
They
right?
didn't check. So 86 data points, just because we take it in 5 minutes, that's a lot of data points on people.
Mhm.
So there's really some magic into our test methodology. It even makes it harder to game um, because it's not a forced choice.
Yeah.
When you think of, like, I'll pick on the Myers-Briggs, not because it's bad, but I'm just going to pick on it here. In the Myers-Briggs, there's a question that says, are you pressure prompted or are you an early starter? And they're trying to get at the judging perceiving dimension.
Mhm.
That if you're an early starter, that's a J. If you're pressure prompted, that's a P. And let's just say I'm pressure prompted, but I'm like, I'm not sure I want my employer to know that.
Yeah.
So, or you might say, well, it depends. When I think it's
Yeah.
important, I'm an early starter. But, if it's something like the dishes,
Yeah.
I kind of do that
Yeah,
last thing.
that's definitely one of those it depends
So,
moments.
those forced choice where you have to answer, and
Mhm.
in certain instances it may not fit, or in certain instances you might say, I'm biased how the audience
Yeah,
might
but
perceive it.
yeah.
That's right. So you have to be careful. Some test methodologies are easier to game, or maybe not quite as robust in that process.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's completely self-reporting. I mean, like you said, it's stimulus response. Yeah, this really feels like me and this doesn't. And then you're able to plot this. And I love how you have it plotted on 2 different scales, so to speak, where you have your reality and then you have how you are functioning in the world around you, like now. So what's pulling and pushing at you that changes who you are. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it can be. So it's designed. And we don't want to give the secret sauce away,
Yeah.
but it's designed. One measure is consistently who you are, test retest. So if we tested you, 10 years ago and we tested you today, it's designed to be very consistent.
Mm-hmm.
But the other dimension of that is how you perceive yourself to be responding to your environment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually work, but it can be if you had a death in the family, of recently
A new
gave
birth.
birth.
Yep.
That, I
It's
mean, imagine your world where this was my wife, high-end consultant, had kids, not doing high-end consulting. If you tested her at that moment in time, it's like, I am modifying myself a lot,
so
and
much.
I'm not getting any of the stimulus that I need,
Or
the
sleep. Yeah.
or sleep. So she, if tested at that moment in time, would have been modifying highly. And what's important is if you see people who are modifying, either in a previous job
Mm-hmm.
or in your current role, you can do something about it, and
Yeah.
and ask some provocative questions. Say, hey, how can we turn this around?
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of that back of the t-shirt stuff that we were talking about earlier too, because you're not realizing, a lot of times you don't realize how much you're modifying your behavior.
Which is really de-energizing. You
Mm-hmm.
can I like to think of it as, if you're getting your stimulus, it's like writing with your strong hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're not getting your stimulus, it's like writing with your opposite hand. You can do it.
Yeah.
It's just not as good.
Takes
It
longer.
it takes longer, takes a lot more
Frustrating.
mental concentration. And if I had you do it all day, you'd be cramping up. You'd be like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then your spouse would say, how was work today, dear? And you're like,
Ugh.
I don't know. I was writing with my wrong hand all day and I have to redo all the work. It was terrible. My hand's cramped, and And frankly, I need a drink. And
Yeah.
and that's what we do to people unintentionally at work,
Hmm.
is without knowing or without regard to their needs, we put them sometimes in positions. They're asking them to adapt. They're not getting their stimulus, and they're just going to burn out and either quit or do a bad job or quit in place, which means they've given up and they're just taking
I'm just here for the
salary.
paycheck. It's like the absenteeism. They're just sitting there at their desk, playing solitaire half the time. And
Oh,
they're just there,
it's tragic.
So let's talk about teams, because your leadership philosophy is around teams. And I know you have a new launch coming up. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the project dream teams. It's really about team discovery.
Mhm.
To discover is your team well positioned to execute on the corporate strategy or your department strategy, or even if just your team strategy, and how is your team made up, and like how can we coach them to work together better, and coach them to say they're not a good fit for the team, for the strategy, how to stretch to get there.
Mm.
So it's really about team dynamics and team fit for strategy. We're excited because it's the same science. It's just one of these data applications that we built into the software, which enables, this is something Arnold Daniels, our founder, could have done this
Hmm.
40 years ago with pencil and paper,
Yeah.
but it would have just taken a lot of work, and we would have had to get 10 people around a conference room table, and Arnold would be shuffling paper and divining things like a wizard, and people would
Right.
be like, what is that? And you're like, he's really smart
Yeah.
and he's using the science. But we built that into the software, so it's very accessible to
Hmm.
companies, and it's very accessible for a consultant like yourself to guide companies through this journey.
Yeah. I am excited for it as well. And the tool is really designed for multiple applications. So it's a hiring tool. It's to inspire, which is that whole creation of opportunities for your teams to know their strengths, to work with them more, to be more effective managers, leadership. Everything is in that
I love how
inspire
you
model.
position it. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and company culture and all of those things are in that inspire tool. And then we have the diagnose and design. So there are so many different applications that anyone at any point can come in and just use a portion of it or the whole suite. So it's really very flexible how you guys have created this to use it in an organization. Whose idea
Well,
was that?
I think we're just getting started. I, I think in 10 years we might look back at what we're doing today and say, wow, we've
It's
come a
like
long
pencil and
way.
paper. Yeah.
Yeah, at least it's not pencil and paper, but it will look like that.
Hmm.
And it's because the discipline of talent optimization is just getting started.
Hmm.
Um, we're early in what is the implications of using data and analytics on managing people, getting them into the right job,
Hmm.
making sure there's fit with job, fit with manager, fit with team, fit with culture. And if you do that, we really unlock a lot of potential.
Yeah.
You know, like you started smiling when I said that. That's what your employees will do if you get them in the right job, right manager, right team. They're like, thank you, thank you.
Like going to work every day with a smile on your face, feeling happy, and coming home energized
At least
because you
most
had a great
days.
day. Hmm.
At
Yeah,
least most days.
most days. Yeah. How does the how does anyone get started if they wanted to find out more about Predictive Index, or they want to get started with using this tool? Like, what is the first thing you would suggest a company start with?
Well,
Well, of course, it's depending on what their goals are, of course, but
I really think if it depends who it is in the organization.
mhm,
And if they are in the talent function, um, they have a great view into the company. So they're either called HR or people operations, some talent function.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to realize, do I have enough power in the company to do something strategic? Do I have a voice at the C-suite in
Mm-hmm.
this organization? Or are they in the C-suite and they're thinking of really getting to use this lever? Finally, I've pulled a lot of levers at my company, but now I want to pull the talent lever. Um, if they're in those positions, the first thing I would do is call someone such as yourself, a consultant in the PI sphere that can understand them. What are
Mm-hmm.
you trying to accomplish? And then understands the tools available and where do they want to start.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and often with human resources, we often start with hiring.
Right. Yeah.
It's almost no company doesn't have a hiring problem. Um, Even if they're a 50-person company, very stable workforce, they're still hiring 5 or 10 people a year. It's almost impossible through retirement or
Yep.
uh,
Someone moving
voluntary,
out or
involuntary.
yep.
It just happens. So even a stable company has some demand. But it's, what's their biggest challenge? What's their biggest issue? If you're if I'm talking to someone from the C-suite, I usually start strategically. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And is your team able to pull this off?
Mm-hmm. That's
And
what I love about the software. You can really plot everyone, see what their strengths are, and then align it with the strategy that you have for your team or your company, and see if they're in alignment with the strategy. And if they're not, then you know where to start from. Let's try to get in alignment here. So I think that's one of those silver bullets in the PI software that allows you to really look at your strategic plan for your organization, and then the people that you have. What do you actually have? What are those resources you have in the people, and see if it's in alignment or not.
and some companies get this right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe someone in the organization really sweat the details on people, but so many companies don't have it right. That
Mm-hmm.
they let people stay in the wrong roles for too long of a period of time.
Yeah.
They've got B's and C players when they need in A priority roles that just are holding them back, and they're frustrated because they're not able to pull off what they want to.
And it's not like you have to let that person go. They're probably a better fit somewhere else in the company, and you just haven't explored that yet because you don't have the data.
Certainly, the first thing we try and do when someone, and let me, D and C players are relatively easy.
Mm-hmm.
You know that for most companies usually don't have the biggest problems are when people are B plus, and they're almost there but not quite there. The first question we ask is there another role in the company where this person could really blossom and be an A?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there something that we can take off their plate or augment, or could we make an augmentation? And a great example of this, what if you have a great sales manager who's just not very quantitative?
Mm-hmm.
And you keep talking about metrics and KPIs, and they're like, huh? And they either don't get it or they don't like it, so they don't
Or
spend
they don't
time there.
care. You're right. It's like, it's just not in my wheelhouse. I don't care.
Assign them 3 hours a week of a finance person to say, maybe it's 5 hours in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
You go, listen, I'm going to help you build these models and these metrics. You're going to give me all of your qualitative input. I'm going to turn them into quantitative stuff. Mike, your boss, is going to get off your back because we're going to have awesome metrics, and we're going to track over time. And I'm going to make you love these metrics because, and the person's going to be like, why didn't you say so?
Like,
Uh,
you see, and the shoulders and they relax. It's like, oh, fresh
that's
air.
right. So you
Mhm.
can do that augmentation. Doesn't always work, but that's what we try and do. Now, sometimes you have a player that you can't find the right role, and you can't change the role or augment enough, and that's when you have career discussion. what is it you want to do? You're probably not happy in this role.
Mhm.
We want to really make you a happy alumni, because it doesn't seem to be working out. And there may be a role in the future that works.
Yeah.
And I think if you consistently make happy alumni,
Mhm.
sometimes people left because they had a better opportunity. Sometimes family stuff happens. We just had an employee give notice who's going to work with her father,
Mhm.
on an entrepreneurial venture. And you're just like, that's
That's
great. I mean,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, you just want them to be successful out there. But when you make a happy alumni because it wasn't working out, it can still be just as joyous if you do it the right way.
Yes, I totally agree with that because sometimes it's just not a right fit. And when you recognize that and not just recognizing it, you know, by gut instinct, but you have measurable data and you have something on paper that shows, listen, this is not a good fit, then you can have a very different discussion and it doesn't become personal. And I think a lot of times things get personal and people leave hurt or angry, and it doesn't have to be that way. So that's
I
amazing.
think the most important thing to start that conversation for a manager is, does that person feel that you have their back?
Hmm.
If
Yeah.
if I worked for you for a year and I knew that you cared about me through little things, maybe my child fell out of a tree and broke his wrist, and you're like, listen, take 2 days, make sure that your
Hmm.
child's okay. Or you entered into career discussions with me and you were constantly trying to help me and counsel me and mentor
Hmm.
me. That when it comes to you saying, Mike, it's really not working, I'm like, well, you tried. You care about me as a person. You counseled me on my career, and I might not like the answer, but
Hmm.
I still respect you.
I
So
respect
that
it. Right.
that's important, is, do you have all of your employees' backs?
Hmm. And this idea too that a lot of people leave companies because of bad managers. I know there's a really high statistic on that. It's it's I think a lot of people get into management roles without any kind of training to be a manager or any kind of leadership training. They're just promoted. And so this tool can help you really promote the right people and have those discussions, have those career pathing discussions with them, right?
Well, if you think about how people become managers, it's often they might manage uh, a process or a project and have no direct reports, but they're now responsible for at least something.
Hmm.
Maybe it's the integrity of data input on Salesforce, and then they do a good job, so that you give them a resource. They get one maybe
Hmm.
to start, and they're like, "I'm a manager. I've got one resource," and then all of a sudden they're like, "I need to manage someone. How do I want to manage someone?
Hmm.
I only know how to manage myself." And then they're going to say, "Well, I had a great manager once," and they're going to probably mimic that style, which all they're doing is they picked a style that worked for them,
Right.
not the
That worked
style that's going
on
to,
them, not for them. It worked on them.
it worked on them, not for them. And so the question is, they often apply the style that worked, you know,
Yeah.
on them, and it might not work for those people. So we actually have tools that'll say, how can you modify yourself so
Hmm.
that you can get the most out of the resources that are under the people resources?
Right.
And how do you understand the joys and frustrations of those people who are working together? And it really does give someone a head start.
Hmm.
um, I've seen, my stepsister writes for Hollywood, and for many years she was in the writers room, and then she got promoted, so she became the right hand person. But then
Hmm.
she finally got her own show, and she was in charge.
Right.
And she actually spent the first day saying, creating a document, what's it like to work with me? And she spent all of this time talking about her quirks and joys and frustrations, and she used a bunch of psychometric stuff in it.
Yeah.
But I read this document, and this was sort of course, she's a writer, so it's very
Right.
funny. Uh, but if you read this, you'd be like, I think I know who my boss is. I think I know what I'm getting into, and 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 these are the tools that really enlightened managers sometimes do it on their own.
Yeah.
But we really democratize those tools so that people can do it, even if they just have that one resource.
That is fantastic. That sounds like a lot of fun. And you have to be really self-aware to do something like that too, which is what this helps you become. It helps you dig a little bit deeper and become a little more self-aware so that you can have that kind of a dialogue with someone. Well, this is how I am. And if it um, starts getting on your nerves, I give you permission to tell me, you know? So in working with some other leaders, that's one of the things that I think they most appreciate is when they're able to empower those around them to really have a voice and speak up and say, this works for me or this doesn't work for me, instead of feeling uh, like they have no voice or powerless to do anything in the company. So this really helps empower their direct reports, which empowers the others below, and it just gives everyone a voice in the organization.
I think enlightened human resource or people ops teams will create feedback loop opportunities, whether it's through employee experience surveys, engagement
Mhm.
surveys, some mechanism to get feedback. Because if people have a voice, one,
Mhm.
and then two, you actually take action on listening to that voice. And
Mhm.
you can't always exactly, because it could be anonymous and you don't know who it was. And there are things that I wish you paid us more, and maybe that doesn't happen. But there are so many things you can take action on. Those feedback loops are critical to building that culture and work harding a company so that people
Mhm.
go, I did have a bad day, but this isn't a bad company. I'm going to give it another shot.
Absolutely. And all these little tools, all these little things we're talking about is baked into the predictive index resource. So if you don't know how to do employee engagement surveys, we've got that for you. If you don't know how to start the conversation, there's a lot, even in hiring, there's a lot of questions and really interesting opportunities for you to ask the right things of people to get the response that you're looking for. So you guys have thought of a lot of things that I don't think others have.
One of the things on the employee experience survey, um, or engagement survey, we use those names interchangeably, but we spend time trying to find out, is the person engaged or not?
Mm-hmm.
But then we also try and find out, what are the sources of disengagement? Are you
Mm.
disengaged with job, manager, team, or company?
Ooh.
And it gives you a clue or clues into what you need to turn around. Some people might be like, hey, it's the manager.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you realize, wow, there's like 4 of the 5 people on this team who thinks it's the manager.
Mm-hmm.
We have an opportunity to coach up this manager.
Right.
Or it might be one person says, this job's just not for me. I love the company, I love our mission, but could I have any other job, please?
Yeah.
And it's one of these things that if you get these, you can move your chess pieces around.
Yeah.
And so it's not just about finding out engagement, it's about finding out sources of disengagement.
Yeah. That is, which goes back to again what we were talking about with actually taking the assessment. It's not just what you check off, but what you didn't check off.
That's right.
That is, so we use all the data, like what is there right in front of us and what's not there, like what's missing. And there's ways to measure all of it. And I think that's what's really exciting about PI and the future of PI. And I really, really appreciate you sharing a lot of that. I have one more question for you, which is more on the personal side. So for your children, how do you teach them about leadership? Like, what is your advice to them about leadership? And what is your advice to them about building their own confidence to step out boldly in this world?
Boy, that is a really good question. So we've tried to figure out the reference profiles of our children.
How old should
And
someone be to take that, by the way?
well, the survey is only validated for 18 and above.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it doesn't work at 17 or 16.
Mhm.
It's just we haven't done the work to validate it for, like, say, college
High school.
placement.
Right. Oh,
What you want to make sure is, do they have a strong enough vocabulary to be able to understand the questions, the instrument? And for most high schoolers, they're fine.
Mhm.
But there's a second question: is high schoolers or even junior high schoolers are still trying to figure out who they are,
Mhm.
and it still may be very much in flux.
Mhm.
So that you may not, if you assess someone at 12 who, even though they had a very high vocabulary, they might be like,
I don't even
I'm
know
not sure.
what I am. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So what I did, our youngest, when he was 11, we weren't sure. We thought it was two reference profiles, either
Mhm.
venturer or individualist. We just couldn't figure out where the patience drive was. I just brought home both reports. I said,
Mhm.
read these. Which one are you?
Yeah.
He goes, I'm definitely an individualist. This is me. This is totally
Oh.
me. So it wasn't a scientific
Right. Give you a
way to
ballpark.
approach this, but it gives us a proxy.
Mhm.
And I have actually, my wife and I have been like, okay, individualists, they're supremely unimpressed with authority. Okay, we're going to have to change our parenting style. Um, but, so what's interesting about that is we're trying to just make sure that they are comfortable in their own skin.
Mhm.
Because I think, first and foremost, are they comfortable in their own skin? Then they'll find their voice
Yeah.
to be leaders, to develop followership, to do it in their own way. Because the one we think is a captain and one we think is an individual. If we gave them the same instructions,
Mhm.
they would definitely not
Execute the same way.
execute the same way. So, and honestly, while I have credentials to give you consulting at work, I don't have credentials to give anyone consulting as a parent.
I know. Listen, parenting is the hardest job that you can do. So I love that, you're giving them the space to understand themselves and grow, be really, really comfortable with who they are, and not try to force anything on them. That is how they can be audaciously confident in this world and step out and do bold and great things. So thank you so much, Mike, for giving me your time today and sharing all this wonderful information about Predictive Index and your journey and all this insight. I really appreciate it. Is there anything that you want to share, last words, before we wrap?
No, but I do love your energy. I think this audaciously confident are your initials linked to
AC.
that?
Yeah, Alicia
Okay,
Couri. Yeah.
I'm a little slow on the uptake, but
It's
I
all
think
branding.
no, I love the energy. It's great. It's infectious.
Thank
I
you.
haven't smiled this much in a long time, so I appreciate
Yay.
that. And thank you for the great line of questioning. Really
Oh,
appreciate the
thank you.
opportunity.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So with that, I'm going to say, guys, be bold, be brave, and step out with audacious confidence as you lead your teams, you lead your movement, or you lead your organization. And thank you so much for spending time with us today. I'll see
No,
you
thank you.
next time. Okay, bye.
Awesome.
Audacious confidence is the unshakable belief in yourself that's so brave and so bold that you step into what's possible for yourself, despite your feelings, fears, or failures. I encourage you to follow subscribe, like, and share this out with your friends. To learn more about our guests, check out some additional episodes. Go to aliciacouri.com/leading with audacious confidence. Until next time, this is Alicia Couri saying, live your life bold, brave, and step out with audacious confidence. Till next time.